Okay, Sunday, August 3rd, 2025. What am I doing? I'm outside walking around here in Ukraine, and this is the second video. I was just trying to record, and then I don't know, a call broke my last video, and I don't have video editing software, so I just decided I'll do everything from scratch. But yeah, this second video, what do I want to talk about is I read some LinkedIn posts about like the struggle that Ukrainian war entrepreneurs are having to get funds. They have some great ideas, low-tech ideas on the battlefield, and they want to get this funded and mass produced, and they're seeking investors, right? But what I want to do is talk about two things, like what an investor is, what does it mean to be an investor, and then also this why it's hard to invest in Ukraine. What makes it hard, and most of this is like Ukrainian nationalism actually makes it hard to invest in Ukraine. But let's first talk about what's an investor. So an investor is a guy who's got some money, he's got some freed up money, and instead of putting the money in the bank and getting a guaranteed 5% at no risk, or putting the money in NVIDIA and doubling his money every year or tripling his money every year, he wants to take even more risk and get a bigger return. And it's right now very hard to find investors because, as I said about this NVIDIA stocks and Netflix stocks and all these things, it's a lot easier to just put your money in the stocks and just go fishing, and you'll pretty much get a better than the S&P 500 or just sitting on your money in a bank account type of return. So, these Ukrainians are trying to court investors, versus donations. I think these guys have gotten a lot of donations where people give the money without anything, without the expectation of return. But this article or this LinkedIn blog post was saying how hard it is for them to find investors because they're so busy on the front line, and they're innovating products. They're coming up with like low-tech ideas that cost much less than what the US can produce them for, and all of this. So I just want to talk about this a little bit, and this is to be helpful to them. So like I said, we're first talking about an investor, right? So an investor is this like a person. They don't care. They want to put their money somewhere and get a return out of it, in the future, much more than what they put into it. And it has to be adjusted for the risk. So if they're investing in a Ukrainian a weapons startup, they probably want 10 times their money back in 5 years, and this is not unreasonable. A lot of these private equity, I mean, look at the Figma people who invested in Figma. Figma went IPO for it opened on the market at like tens of billions of dollars, and their investors probably put in like tens of millions of dollars. So they made probably 100 times their money back. The people who were on the ground floor, before it went to the stock market. Yeah, investors, they don't care about the war. They don't care about human rights and all this kind of things for the most part. Those are donors. Those are charities. So don't mix this up. What is an investor? Because, if investors cared about all that stuff, there'd be money flowing into Africa. Africa would have fresh water everywhere. The whole Sahara Desert would be green already, full of fields. They wouldn't be depending on US aid handouts or, handouts from Europe and all this kind of thing. So if that mattered, if humanitarian stuff mattered or just causes mattered, investment money would be flowing everywhere. But so that's something these Ukrainian guys have to understand, what an investor wants. So they want to get their money in, they want to get their money out. But also then the bureaucracy in Ukraine is also another, and this blog post mentioned that, is another hindrance, the language barrier, so now we're on full Ukrainian nationalism now. They won't allow us to have English films in the theaters, or have English subtitles at least, on the movies, or have it in native English with Ukrainian subtitles like they do in Scandinavia so people can learn better English, because they understand, like in Scandinavia, they understand you need to have the second working language in English to bring in the investors. It has to be easy for them to get their money in, and it has to be easy for them to get it out. So in Ukraine, you got to go through a lot of bureaucracy. I mean, I've done investing in Ukraine in real estate, namely, apartments, and it's hard. It takes forever to open an account, even when you got the money and you want to, buy the apartment, the bank can block you because there's some one word in the contract is wrong, because the bank cares and they look through your contract and they try to find every reason to block your transaction, and you got to call up lawyers and all kind of stuff. So it's a real, it's a lot easier to, like I say, just buy U.S. stocks and watch movies, or go fishing. I'm not much of a fisherman, so I am a movie guy. And then 1 or 2 months pass and you got 25-30% of your money it's gone up 25-30%, and you can just sell it and get the money out and go out and buy a car or whatever you want. You can do all kinds of stuff. So yeah, that's what investors want. But in Ukraine, they want you to speak Ukrainian, and their bureaucracy, and like I said, this nationalism, it's so useless. It's so useless to like I said, I saw this in Belgium. Everyone has to speak French, and then you go to the next country, everyone has to speak Dutch, and everyone has to speak German. Investors don't want to deal with that crap. Like I said, it's just a lot easier to go online and buy stocks or go to America and invest there where everything, it's easy, So you're in competition for those investors because there's not too many of them. And there's not too many people willing to take a risk here in Ukraine on a drone startup or something, especially when it's low tech. And this is the other problem with the argument, is the low tech, right? So they make a drone out of duct tape and chicken wire, and it's powered up by an iPhone, and it's got maybe whatever, and it can drop grenades. It's all using Radio Shack parts, or something like that. But the issue with that, an investor would have an issue with that it's easily copied. So the investor can look at this prototype and then take it to China and get it copied there and mass produced in a factory, and then just come back and sell it to the Ukrainian army as an external person. So yeah, it's sad. I'm living in Ukraine. My daughter was born here. I have investments here myself, but this is the sad, hard reality. Investors want to get their money in. They want to double, triple that money in a few years and get the money out and then go on to the next thing. If everyone cared about war and about genocide and all this stuff, you would see Goldman Sachs having offices in every African country 50 years ago. Trying to get fresh water, arable land, save the animals. Those are not investment business cases. Those are charity business cases. You're looking for a donation because you can't give the money back. The money will just get eaten up, in whatever it is. So I don't know. That's something people need to understand. And you Ukrainian nationalists and stuff like this, if you want to internationalize and normalize your country, don't be like Belgium. Be like Norway. Be like Finland. Be like Sweden. Have English as your second working language, your second national language, so that it is easy for people, who are a lot nicer than me, to come in here and get their money in and get their money out, because it is a bureaucratic headache. I remember even before the war when I was doing apartments, how many times my deals got blocked because of the bank or because of something, something or another, and I had to do all this extra paperwork because I'm a foreigner, and I have to pay all this. I didn't mind the extra taxes. I get it, taxing foreign speculators, because we're just buying and selling shit that normally people would buy and for a family, right? I agree, a Ukrainian family who's going to be having their kids and everything in the apartment. Now I'm having that, anyway. They shouldn't have to pay capital gains tax, but a speculator should. Someone who's buying and flipping a property in 2 years, definitely they should pay. And that's the benefit to the society. That's what's in it for Ukraine, right? That they can charge this capital gain tax, and the investor gets 65% of the profit, the government gets 35%, everybody's happy. But when you make it so hard, you're just driving people away from your country. There's other countries to invest into. There's other charitable causes, like saving white rhinoceroses or, helping out Palestinians. I don't want to take anything away from the Ukrainians, but this is just hard truth. You know, like these quote-unquote investors that you're looking for, they're looking at Ukraine in perspective of other things, you know, out there. And Ukraine needs to become an easy place to invest into. And the nationalism just stops all that. All the nationalism is going to do is end the country, you know, because no money will come in, you know, you know, and if Trump doesn't pull this off to stop the war, at least get it to halt, like I said, become a frozen conflict, and there's going to be like 5 or 10 years, you know, that we're going to be waiting to see, you know, let's say they do freeze the conflict. It's going to be like Korea. Korea was poor for like 20 years until people realize, okay, the North Koreans really aren't coming, you know, it really is frozen. We can start putting money into this economy. You know, so it's not going to happen overnight. You know, if the war just pauses, like we haven't had an air alarm today, and then maybe tomorrow we don't get an air alarm, and then a year from now we don't have an air alarm. People want this, like, it takes like 10 years to validate that, that the war is paused, you know, because like I said, I don't think there's going to be any formal ending to the war. It's just going to one day just kind of freeze, and then it's just going to go day after day after day, and then people are going to finally say, okay, we're like in the Korean War situation now. Things are frozen, and then the airlines and all this start coming back, and the tourism comes back, but this is a long way off. So the type of investor you're looking for now is a guy who wants to take, who's willing to take a lot of risk, who probably has some affection for Ukraine, you know, so he's somewhat of a donor. But your true investors, the people with like sacks and sacks of money, you know, millions and millions of dollars, you know, you guys with your, you know, weapons startups, your stuff has to be different, has to be protected by patents. It can't be easily copied, and that's exactly what would you know, lose the war effort. That you have expensive weapons you can't buy many of, and they're protected by patents, so you can't use them. So really, I think what you're looking for are donations. You know, donations to build these low-tech weapons. You know, or an angel investor. You know, one who doesn't care about making money. He cares more about the cause. Because, you know, your Wall Street guys, the reason why they're investing in these like American companies for millions of dollars and their weapons cost more is because they're protected by patent, and maybe they're integrated with the F-35 or something, and they're meant for like something else, you know, in addition to them having pitch decks and all this other stuff. But yeah, and then to get a hold of these investors, you do need someone on your team that knows how to talk good English, you know, knows how to get the doors opened in New York and London and California, to get those meetings. They're hard. I used to do this. I used to work for an investment bank. You know, I used to actually pitch Eastern European investing, and I used to have to go to Canary Wharf in London and stuff, and I used to organize these trips where I was having like 5 meetings a day for 5 days in a row, giving 25 presentations, and if you're lucky, 2 people would call you back and, you know, buy your funds. And they were always asking you, like, well, why shouldn't I just invest in the S&P 500? Why would I take risk in a small company in Eastern Europe run by a bunch of alcoholics who can't even do a proper financials? And, you know, this was 20 years ago. They were right. The NASDAQ in the last 20 years is up like 10 times. And most of these Eastern European companies haven't done anything, mostly gone bankrupt, you know, or gotten bought up by someone bigger at a very low multiple. So, yeah, I just wanted to get that out there, straighten up what's investing, what's charity, you know, give some advice to these Ukrainian startups, you know, people, like I said, we talked about easy in and out, what investors want, you know, what Ukraine needs to do to get foreign direct investment. You know, everything just needs to work here in English. It can't be like Belgium. It can't be this, you know, this whole thing with every European country being different and having its own culture and stuff. It's actually what's undoing Europe. It'll be the end of Europe. It'll be the end of its culture. You know, nobody wants to deal with this. You know, people, you know, it's like I said, so much easier to just buy Netflix stock, Nvidia stock. You know, Amazon in the long run will be a real winner. It's gone flat now, but it's I think the potential for Amazon is huge. You know, whatever else, you know, there's this company that was started in the Netherlands by the guy who had Yandex, you know, NBIS, Nebius Systems or something. You know, this is easy. You just go on your bank and click, and you buy it, and like a week later, money is up 10-15%. I mean, and you know, you go and give your money to some guys on eastern Ukraine making drones, you know, from Coke cans and chicken wire and duct tape, and you might have to wait 10 years even to see any of your money back. You know, so yeah, it's some food for thought there. You know, I would be soliciting donations. I would be soliciting something like that, because getting your money out of Ukraine, that's another story, you know, with the martial law. What I find ironic is that if you go earn a bunch of money here and you buy a Porsche, the Porsche company can export that money back to Germany and then send another Porsche here. But if you're a private individual like me, and you flip an apartment and everything, we can't get our money out. I mean, you can do it like the Bitcoin way. You take out a wad of cash and you go to some guy with Bitcoin, if you're lucky enough to find someone who has some Bitcoin, and you get it in Bitcoin, and then you go to Germany or the US and you get it out, and then you just spend off that cash. I mean, it's just a real shady, dodgy way. There's no official way to get the money out. And investors, like I say, they want an exit. They want to get their money out and do something else. You know, if the world cared about human things and about, it would be very different. Wall Street wouldn't be in Wall Street. It would be like I said, in Africa somewhere, you know, where there's been human misery and suffering like what we're seeing here in Ukraine. And this is just a way of life over there for the last long time. Generations, you know. So sad but true, you know. Like I said, it's a lot of reflection coming back from Belgium and, you know, reading the posts every day. But anyway, take care. See you. Bye.